everything we know about audio, there's still stuff we don't. And there's some people out there who want to attribute everything to a reason. They dedicate their life to finding the logical reason behind whatever it is because that somehow gives them comfort, makes them feel better. Yet, we're also flying on a rock through space that's just, whipping around 1,000 miles an hour. Okay, so there's some stuff we may not know entirely when it comes to audio and how it hits our ears and what's going on with digital audio compared to analog. And if there wasn't, let's just put it this way, if there wasn't anything that we didn't know, wouldn't every single person who makes a plugin just be able to easily emulate exactly what an analog piece of gear sounds like in the digital world? Wouldn't it be so exact that there'd be no reason for any analog gear anymore? It would just be a done deal? It would, wouldn't it? Wouldn't it just be totally simple? And guess what? It's not. It's not. It's not one of those things that's just easy peasy. Yeah, let's emulate this. There we go. It's the same on a curve. The curve looks the same. EQ's the same. Logically, it must be the same. Well, you know what? They tried that, and it's not. And if you don't believe me, let me just show you our hero here, Andrew Scheps, talking about something I think means a lot, and I think everybody should take note of this. So this is fair use for teaching purposes. Check this out. Fair use for teaching purposes. Here we go.
I think one of the problems is that you can, especially looking like spectrum analyzers and things like that, you can kind of kid yourself. I've spent some time, fortunately for me, like developing the plugin with waves and doing some sort of EQ development time where you're being an uber geek about it. And you're not like trying to get work done. You're really only caring about what an EQ sounds like. And we were trying to model a band of an EQ, and it's not the Neve thing, it was something else. And like, it looked exactly the same on an Audio Precision, which is a $40,000 version of a spectrum analyzer. It looked exactly the same. And it just didn't sound right. Put a snare drum through it. Nope. This sounds way better than that. And we found out that it was because we hadn't bothered to put in the low pass at like 25K and the high pass at 3 hertz that you get going through a transformer. That has nothing to do with the EQ circuit. It's the input to the box. As soon as we put that in, 1K sounded right. So it doesn't make any sense some of the time. And I think that unless you're just trying to find a problem, there's a build-up frequency and you're just trying to find it to get rid of it, there's no point in knowing like what frequency stuff is happening at, because the way it interacts doesn't always make sense.
This is why I believe when you change something that's got nothing to do with whatever the thing is that you're trying to mess with, whether it's add random noise or anything, literally a high pass filter way up at 25K and a low pass filter at 25K and a high pass filter at 3 hertz, whether you're doing that or you're simply, adding random noise through dither or whatever it is. This is why he believes what he believes, because he's been through all the paces. He's used $40,000 worth of equipment working with the top manufacturer of plugins in the world to try to make what he's doing in this digital, EQ the same as the analog, and using the piece of gear that I know no one has, and I'm sure people are going to weigh in the comments and say they do. Well, can't help that. Some people want to be people. But I got to tell you, let's be real. $40,000 worth of equipment on a spectrum analyzer is not what I'm using on my desk. It's not what most of you guys are using, and it's not the free plugin you downloaded. It's not the PAZ that you have. He's using one of those that costs $40K, and he cannot see a difference on that thing. It's exactly the same, okay? Yet, doesn't sound the same. 1K doesn't sound right. The snare doesn't sound right until you add something way out of the spectrum on the high end, that's that low pass filter at 25K, and way out of the spectrum on the low end, that's the high pass filter at 3 hertz. Until you add that, 1K doesn't sound right. If this isn't the clearest definition and explanation coming from somebody who's had the opportunities that we all don't have to work with the top manufacturers of plugins to get the results like this using gear that they have to really figure it out, if this doesn't tell you that there's more going on than what you just think based on whatever graphs you're using and based on logic, You know, I'm a fan of logic sometimes, especially in the natural world. Logic is good. But I believe audio is slightly above our understanding if you're trying to understand all of it, because there's too many variables. There's too many variables with the brain, with the ears, with the way audio is perceived compared to the way it looks, with just the way the frequency spectrum, with the way we hear low end information compared to high end information. There's too many variables. So even though you'll always run into people who want to define the way it is and want to define exactly what works, and this is this, and if you change something outside of that, it can't possibly have an effect on this, you got to realize those people are clinging to something. They're hanging on to the idea that they have control because of their understanding of logic. I don't think that that's relevant. Not in audio. You know, in something else, maybe. Not in audio. Audio is one of these things where, like I told you, if everybody could just look at a graph and figure it out, every single emulation of every plugin would be exactly the same as analog. And it's not. We're not there yet. There's a reason. It's because of things like this. But keep this in mind also. If you want to get the effect of running through analog summing, just do what he just said. Do the 25K low pass and do the 3 hertz high pass filter. And what you'll basically be getting is the effect of running through transformers. And you could also cheat that in a little bit. You know, on the high end, instead of 25K on your low pass, you know, make it 22.5K. All right, make it 23K. You know, just play with it and see what it sounds like. It's going to change the way things sound. The same on the other end. Mess with from 3 hertz, go up to 10 hertz. You're feeling frisky, go to 15 hertz. What I'm saying is you can literally mess with the stuff you don't think will matter, and you be surprised at what matters, okay? You be surprised at how you'll get 1K in the middle of the spectrum to sound right by doing things like that. Because that's why these type of conversations are so valuable, because they go against the grain. And this roughs people up, but again, who cares? In my opinion, this is why audio is one of these things that's so much fun to manipulate and to play with. You know, we have tools to be able to manipulate and play with it, but there's still that like little bit of magic to it. And not magic in the sense of, you know, magic, but magic in the sense that we don't fully understand it. So try messing with things that you don't fully understand why they could help something else. And then maybe you'll find that it does. And this is not anything outside of the fact that we're listening with our ears and we're deciding what we like. We're not basing it on a graph of what looks the way it looks, because what did he say? He said things don't always interact the way you think they're going to interact. And if you notice, what he also said is if you're looking at one of those analyzers to determine what frequency buildup may be happening and, like, you know, ruining the mix or something, that's actually what it's helpful for, just to determine like where the buildup is in any given place. But don't be looking at that analyzer when you mix. So many people think that it should be flat. There's like a logic to the way it looks. It should, if it's flat and pleasing to the eye, that means pleasing to the ears. It's the opposite of that, because like he said, it doesn't always interact in a way that makes any sense. But you can clearly see when something is overloading in a certain area, and that's the helpful part. That's why if you watch my car test video, you'll see what I'm talking about on, you know, how to pass the car test. I'll link to that at the end. But the point is, if you have buildup in the low end, that's extensive buildup all throughout, you know, your really low end information, you'll never pass the car test. And this is the kind of thing that's super helpful on a spectrum analyzer, because you can't always hear that stuff unless you're dealing with speakers that are going to reproduce those frequencies accurately. You really sometimes can't hear all of what's happening down there, especially people who aren't totally pros. Once, you know, you train yourself to hear low end at a lower volume, you can really get a better handle on it. But if you're expecting to hear low end at the volume you're hearing it, like in the car, in your mix room, you're never going to be satisfied. So there's, you know, ways that you have to learn how to mix because of that. So check out that video if you haven't already. But the point is, that's where your spectrum analyzer is helpful, to see the buildup of certain frequencies. If there's a problem that you're hearing and you want to fix it, they're super helpful. But don't look at it like I mix and it has to be flat and it has to be that's like the worst way to mix. It's never what I do. I'm checking it for low end to make sure I'm not blowing anything up like crazy, that I'm not able to hear super well in the room because I'm not using $40,000 monitors. You understand? So like there's that's why you would be doing stuff like that. And this is the answer here, people. You must be doing things that don't entirely make sense to your logical mind, because sometimes there is something to it. All right? Take it from, this is, by the way, this video was taken when he was mixing in the box. There was some discrepancy about whether he was mixing in the box at this time or not. Yes, he discusses Jay-Z in it. He discusses things he's done, but he also discusses Adele. And I'm pretty sure that was done all in the box. So there's a lot of stuff, you know, at this era in his career, he's in the box and he's talking about this. So, you know, that you gotta, I'm just saying, for a timeline here, this is not when he was on the console. Just so everybody's clear. And he was also in the same interview talked about how he gets his mixes, you know, how they're very loud. That always is the same with him, whether he uses a console or not. He's mentioned it, you know, as recent as a few years ago, a couple years ago. He's always in the box and they're always super loud. And that's just the way he mixes, because of the amount of parallel processing he does, the parallel compression. And you know, his rear bus is not, it's not one fader. He's got multiple parallel channels that are processing everything. And I'll link to that video too I made at the end, because the magic to how to get a clean and loud mix is the way he's working with parallel compression, parallel processing in that way. That's how you get it to be as loud as you want it to be. And then you could always back it down a little from there. But that's what's up. He's actually also mentioned, as of recently, he keeps trying to make his mixes lower and lower because he's craving dynamics more now than he was before, you know, earlier in his career by a few years. Now he's craving it more. So now he's actually trying to make them lower all the time. So anyway, it's just stuff to note, stuff to keep in mind. Do me a favor, throw the stuff that you want to note, that you want to keep in mind, that has to do with anything I'm talking about in the comments. And I don't care if I agree with it or not. I still want to hear it, because you know, everybody's opinion is valid. In my opinion, it's just, you know, some of them I might not agree with. No big deal. And some of them you guys, you know, might agree with and or might not. Either way, I still want to hear about it. Subscribe if you haven't already. This is Evan Jaffe, Custom Cut Studios. You guys got this. Take it easy.